Yo, what's up? Sometimes I say I'm going to make a short video, and then about 15 minutes into it, I regret that I said that at the beginning. But this is a pretty narrowly defined topic I want to address in this one monologue, so I think it should be short. In politics, in political science, what is arbitrary is not necessarily evil. The fact that something is arbitrary doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean it's bad, and doesn't mean it's ineffective. I think you'll see why I raise this issue if you stick with me for just a minute here. One of the real strengths of habitat conservation as a paradigm, as an approach to social change, to saving the world, whatever you want to say, within ecology, habitat conservation relies on laws that are very simple and very arbitrary. So you have 10 people in a room looking at a map. They take a pencil and they draw a line on that map. The line may be completely arbitrary. On one side of the line, cutting down a tree is a criminal offense. On the other side of the line, it's completely permissible. So you have an arbitrary legal distinction that saves the lives of animals, that preserves habitat, that may have many more complex downstream effects. We use this term in ecology, downstream effects, knock-on effects, indirect positive effects. But fundamentally, you are talking about something that is arbitrary, that is human-created. It's, we overuse this concept so much of speciesism. These are ideas human beings have. They're anthropocentric, whatever you want to say. Nobody went out and interviewed the animals in the forest. It's probably not going to be based on any kind of biological fact that can be dug up in the earth and proven scientifically. Human beings come together, they have a convention, they have a debate, they have some kind of political process, preferably democratic, and then decide, okay guys, here's the square on the map. Inside that square, nobody's allowed to cut down any trees, nobody's allowed to kill any animals. Vegans are very often criticized for relying on arbitrary moral distinctions. By vegetarians, by flexitarians, by people who have some kind of intermediate position, left-wing social justice types who maybe share some of the aspirations for a better world with vegans, but who are not willing to buy into the ethical and ecological underpinnings of veganism in the 21st century. They will point out things such as, they will argue that, look, there are many, many types of harm, there are many, many types of damage being done to the world, and you, as a vegan, you have arbitrarily drawn a line, and you said, this is the harm I'm willing to tolerate, and this other harm I'm not willing to tolerate. This is what I'm willing to be complicit in, and this is something else is not. Now, what examples they choose to use, it doesn't really matter. They may say, well, mercury pollution is a big problem, and you as a vegan, you don't do anything about it. Yes, your line is drawn in a way that doesn't relate to that. They may raise some of these really boring examples of, what about the exploited laborers on fruit farms? They may raise the issue of pesticides, and this is also interesting. But vegans, we certainly tolerate pesticides along with the rest. Whether or not some vegans want to pretend we don't kill insects. So this sort of person, if they're inclined towards sort of social justice view of the world, their complaint may be that this is arbitrary. And I think the real profound response to that is to say, yes, in politics, many, many distinctions are arbitrary. But arbitrary doesn't mean evil. Arbitrary doesn't mean wrong. The question is it effective? Now, when you get into the morality of war, there are often arbitrary standards of human rights that seem unbelievable. Why are you not allowed to place artillery guns on a riverbank? Why is this torture and something else is not torture? But the fundamental achievement you have to struggle for is having a written agreement, having a convention like the Geneva Convention, having a written convention where 10 people have stood around a table and said, okay, let's decide what's torture. Even if what they decide is wrong, even if the definition they use is terrible, at least you have that fundamental first step of people agreeing there is a line. We're going to draw a line, even if incorrectly, even if arbitrarily. And you can negotiate the details later. You can move the line later. You can say, you know what, when we came up with this convention, nobody thought about giving prisoners mind-altering drugs, which there's a scary history of. Anyway, I did some research on that in the history of China, 20th century China, of, people being put in prisons and drugged. It's ugly. It's a form of torture. Okay, so, our original definition of torture, maybe it only dealt with cruel and unusual punishment, but now we need to think about what that really means. We need to elaborate this. We need to draw the line more clearly, what have you. The ethics of war and combat. These things were designed at a time when satellites were not located in outer space, when many, many things in the world changed. Okay, we need to reconsider this. We need to debate it, and so on. The fact that the line is arbitrary doesn't invalidate that discourse. On the contrary, it's the most fundamental basis for the whole discourse. There's a saying in political science, in debating legislature, people like to say, many people have said this, it's not a quote from one man. If you Google it, you might see it to one person. All legislation is based on animus. Now, animus is a fancy word basically for hatred. And the point of saying that is, look, if I'm in a debate with you and you say to me, look, your law is arbitrary because it's based on animus for something. It's based on the fact that you personally hate and fear something. You're just against it. You're against exploitation of cows, but there's some other issue you're not against. That may be true. Maybe you're right. Maybe vegans just inexplicably have an animus against the dairy industry. Maybe so. Maybe people who've quit smoking just have an animus against tobacco. Maybe it's based on animus. But the point is that does not invalidate the discourse. You can say back, oh, all legislation is based on animus. Issues of arbitrary distinctions are not the end of ethical discourse. They are the beginning. But for vegans, we're not yet even at that stage. We're at the stage of trying to get the 10 people gathered around the table to draw the line, of trying to call the convention, of trying to make people aware this is an issue for modern civilization as fundamental as the ethics of war, as fundamental as the use of torture, as fundamental as the conditions of prisoners in jails. We need to be drawing a line. And we can draw that line 10 times until we get it right. But we're shifting from a view of the world that refused to accept that any such line could exist to a view of the world that such a line must exist.